Good morning. It's Graham Cofe with another Move TV. It's early doors this morning. We thought we'd get out of bed early because it's the last week before Christmas. We can do that. The kids are off, which means that they're at home somewhere or other making a mess. And whilst they're doing that, I've got a doctor in the house. Hello, Luna. Thanks for joining me. Yeah, I was going to say, so this is two first. First time we've had a doctor on. First time we've had someone with a hat. And very fetching it does look too. Yeah, stylish.
You need to go, I tell people on Instagram, go to Lilia Moda with a Lilia.moda. She's from Ukraine. She's come to Liverpool and she doesn't speak very good English yet. So we converse with Reverso or whatever, kind of translation software. And she's just, she does a lot of things like for women. She did a hat specifically for women in solidarity with the women in Iran. Like, she's just an amazing person. So I really, anywhere I am, I'm like, you need to talk to this one. We need to get her on Move. Actually, I tried to get her to go to a net walking event, but she was like, it's a bit early for me to wake up.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Yes, we do. We need to do that. We absolutely need to do that. I've had some fascinating conversations with some people from the Ukraine over the last year or so, and particularly there's a musician that I know from the Ukraine that I've spoken to a few times, and she's reviving all of the old babushka songs. She's putting them into modern sort of dance music.
That's so cool.
It is. It's really very, very cool, and there's a real reason for that as well, because they are the original songs of the Ukraine, if you like, and they've been changed over time by occupation. So it's kind of like a fight back in a peaceful way, which is a really, really beautiful thing. So tell us a little bit about what it is that you do.
I know I start out with like hats, and yeah, I've never really fit into a lot of like categories. So
you've got lots of hats.
I've got lots of hats. I've always had different hats. I help people change their hats as well. So I come from a background in research and applied psychology. And I obviously my voice, like my my accent's not from here in Liverpool. I'm originally from the U.S. My parents were born in Puerto Rico, which is a U.S. territory. And then I came to Sweden to do a postdoc after I'd done my PhD in the University of New Orleans. And then I just decided I don't want to leave Europe. So I applied everywhere that I could think of. I did apply to like Australia. I just didn't want to go back to the US. George W. Bush was president. And, I knew that the US academic system is not great. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll go to a university in England. I went to Preston and then Durham and then Liverpool. And all of them were the same as what I would have encountered in Sweden or US. They were all unwelcoming of people with not an elitist background, who come from working class or poverty, who are people of color, who, anything that's not just a white male, rich, with a background of parents who have done PhDs or things like that. It's just not built for us. So I decided to build my own business. So I have a research, evaluation, and funding consultancy business, and a coaching business, getting people out of academia and into careers that really align with their values. So that's me.
And that must be really difficult for a lot of people that have really sort of followed the path in terms of academia. What's the biggest struggle that you tend to find with someone that's, probably thought that they're going to just carry on in academia, doctorate, start lecturing, etc., and then or research, and and suddenly they're dissatisfied and they want to go out into the corporate world? What's the biggest struggle?
I mean, it's like a toxic relationship. It's like a toxic romantic relationship, because your identity is lost. That's what I find for a lot of people. They're like, but academia was my identity. I gave my 30s to academia. You invest so much, it's kind of like, a sunk costs. fallacy. So they think they can't do anything else because that's been their whole world. And sometimes academia even makes you feel like that. I had one client who said, it's so odd to feel like every day I'm not doing enough in the job. There's always like, well, you haven't done this, you haven't done that. But at the same time, I get the sense that people think I can't do anything else outside of the job, that I'm not good enough for anything else except for academia, and how those two things are so in balance. There's such an imbalance in that statement, because it's like, well, you're not good enough, but no one else will have you. So, identity and feeling like you're enough is the big thing. But a lot of people, I guess, who've been in relationships for a long time, who've devoted their life to a profession, another professional career, probably deal with similar things. So it's a lot of the same things of any kind of mid-career, I don't know, midlife crisis. I don't know. I feel like I've had multiple midlife crises.
I mean, in a way, though, I've had conversations over the years, and I used to be involved in the academic circle in my corporate career as well, because I sold into the academic circles. I just felt that sometimes there are lessons that academia needs to learn from the corporate world, and vice versa. And sometimes it's like never the twain shall meet. I mean, things like social media, for example, must blow the minds, I guess, of some academics, because everything's a small soundbite. Everything's sort of reduced to its smallest nature, if you like, whereas academia is all about building something up and actually really diving deep into something. And suddenly it's like, no, we're going to explain this theoretical science in a snapshot, and they're like, no, you can't do that, some of the PowerPoint presentations that I've seen from academics trying to come over into the corporate career have been dreadful. They're just solely elongated. Yeah.
Yes, I love that we were talking before about the ed tech that you were involved in, because that spoke to me immediately as soon as I was working at University of Central Lancashire. The thing that I was most interested in, and when I was doing the postgraduate certificate in teaching and higher education, was the technology. And that's what I did, like the final project on, or something like this, whatever we had to do for it. And then I put out a paper about learning technology and about how you could use video feedback for student reports, right? So immediately I was interested in that. And then when Prezi came out, I was using Prezi, and everybody's like, what's that? What are you using? And I was like, not PowerPoint.
Wow, look at these presentations. They actually look slick.
Yeah. Obviously, it can make people too dizzy if you have them zoom in and out all the time, but there's a way to do it. But I was immediately fascinated by all the technology and stream, the way that people stream, and the kind of virtual camera things that you can do, and the way that Twitch streamers stream. And I'm like, can I bring that to some of my classes? Can I take that? And I think I've always been a creative person, that it was really difficult to fit into. I thought academia was also really creative in terms of, like, you get to innovate, right? You get to innovate with research and do these really, experiments that were really interesting. And one of my first experiments that I got funding for the British Academy was to look at whether teenagers would take more risks when they have their teen passengers in the car with them versus not. But we had a computer program designed for that, and it had like rock music playing in the background and everything like this. And I just wanted all my experiments to be fun, where I could go out and be like, okay, who wants to do this driving game? And everybody would just be like, I want to participate in Luna's experiment. And then the second one that I did that was also got some funding from Wellcome Trust was on how people manage fear when they're on a roller coaster. So I had virtual reality headsets, and then also all the like psychophysiology, measuring their heart rate and everything like this while they were doing it. and everything, but those things were really hard to sell to people. They were like, no, I don't know, this is too new. It's too different. It's too innovative. And it was really hard to get funding for some of those projects. So I think at the same time, they're really like risk averse. It's like it can push the boundaries, but there is, I think from the corporate world, you could probably learn something about, how to take risks and how to innovate in a way that really pushes boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from the corporate world, you get things like smoke and mirrors. I mean, that's never going to happen in academic circles. You don't publish something until you've proven it. Whereas in the corporate world, someone goes, I have an idea. I'm gonna get that idea out there. I'm gonna start showing people that idea, and actually, I'm gonna put it out before it's ready, because ultimately, I need to start getting the funding in. And then when I start getting the funding in and I start getting the traction with it and I start getting the belief in that, then that's when I'll develop it. So it's almost the other way around. Whereas in academia, you develop it completely and then you'd say, oh, now we've got this. Now it's ready. But ultimately, it could be that can stifle stuff from happening, right? Because it means you're never going to take that risk with it. Yeah. And I love this kind of tension between the corporate world and the academic world. I think it's fascinating. I mean, ultimately, what's the biggest university in the world at the moment? I'd say it's YouTube, right? Yeah. I mean,
absolutely.
Where are people doing most of their learning? It's on YouTube. The academics would say the problem with it is that what's on there isn't validated. And what we do is validate information. We validate research. We validate all of this. But there's got to be some give between the two. Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I was really a proponent of open science. Have slow science and open science. I felt like things needed to slow down. Because it was all about production. Do you know what I mean? It's it's the like ultimate capitalist colonialist system ever. It's all about who has the knowledge. That knowledge is gatekept, right? I mean, that is complete. Yeah, I could go on and on about that, but in terms of political stance on it, but it's really changed. While I was there, I remember thinking we need to make this knowledge accessible. We need to make it so that people can comment on it on an open forum. And it also needs to slow down, because as people are just publishing without really testing it and without getting everyone involved, communities involved that have like maybe even inputted into the research, but they're not privy to the information before it goes out there at all. And a lot of them don't even see the articles because they're behind paywalls, right? So you have to pay to see them. And, YouTube is, you can watch it. Yeah, there may be some commercials, but couldn't we do that with science? Or is there another way of imagining this? And I used to teach. So with community people, they were involved in our research at University of Liverpool before I left. And that was my favorite part, was that we had community engagement in all of the research. And one of the people, I said, I want them involved in the teaching as well, in terms of my teaching. And I was teaching writing. And I was teaching the difference between science writing, like this stifled writing, and the way that journalism is written, and the backward triangle that is created by that. First you're like, well, we believe this, and this is the end result. And journalism's like, this is the end result, and this is let us tell you the background to how we got that, right? Completely opposite. But the way that I found that out was one of the people from the community was like, oh, I used to be a journalist, or I used to be like a editor or something for a newspaper. And I was like, oh my God, you need to come and teach with me. We need to co-teach this to our science students. And that teaching was amazing. And I got a prize for it before I left. And it was amazing. Like, I need to see him again, because I need to just be like, let's reconnect now that I'm no longer there.
There's a lot of synergy in our backgrounds. I actually did my diploma in broadcast journalism at the same time as my degree, and it was fascinating to me to see that pull and push in terms of the writing style, because obviously for academia, as you say, you write everything long form. You're drawing to the argument, whereas in journalism it's like, there's the fact, here's the headline. Now we'll start to explore it, if you're bothered to read it. But if you don't bother to read it, you've still got the headline, you've still got the punch there, and it's so very, very different.
Yes.
And ultimately, I still feel that there needs to be more journalism type writing out there than academic writing, because people's attention spans aren't there, especially these days. They're just not there. You've got to, I've shocked people when I talk to them about writing for social media, so, well, you do realize that the average reading age of this platform is like 7, and they're like, no. You're like, yeah, it's not where you think it is, and like when you do a presentation, if you've gone on past 20 minutes, you've lost people. Yeah. I mean, have you been interested in, talking to you, have you been interested in the way that some science around sort of attention has started to creep into academia? Because I think that's a good thing. I was talking when I was doing stuff in the States with people like Amazon, etc., who have started looking at not necessarily what people are learning in a lesson, but how they're learning that information, and using things like AI to actually look at people's facial expressions, or and actually go, do you know what, they're not taking anything in over there at the moment, they're not taking anything in, and then actually looking back at comparing that to the points within the lecture and going, you've lost them there, you've lost them there, you've lost them there, so that we can start to actually go, this is taught well and this isn't taught well. Because the trouble is, there's been none of that necessarily in academia. It's been like, well, we assume that person's good at teaching if people are getting good scores at the end of it. But how much of that is just down to their own research outside of that session?
Yeah. That's what I did. I mean, there were many classes where I found the material boring, or it wasn't taught by the professor and it was taught by one of their students. And sometimes their students could be good, but you don't know because they haven't been vetted, at all for teaching. And I would just sit and lecture because they were taking attendance. And then I'd go home and I'd actually just read the textbook, underline everything, and then ace the tests, from there, just from the textbook. Because I was like, I'm not learning anything in this. And I get bored super easily. And even with that, I got a PhD. But I think, yeah, we're coming to understand how people pay attention. But I think there's something about, I'm starting to question, especially during the pandemic, how much we value people doing things in the production rather than people having space and time to think and process the information. We process so much information and lay down so many memories as we're sleeping and resting. And if we're not getting good sleep, and I don't know whether, a lot of our students during the pandemic and after are getting good quality sleep. And I think that's a huge part of being able to pay attention, is having that ability to just process and reflect and lay down those long-term memories that allow you to learn new information. It's hard to lay down something else when you have nothing to connect it to. You probably do that a lot, right? Like, oh yeah, I know that because of, I use that with my right hand, so I know to use that one with my, you know what I mean? Like when I was learning to drive in the UK and having to change everything around, it was like, okay, but if I'm holding this with my right hand and the gear shift is over there, or, you just switch it around, so like it was easier to connect it to something that I'd already been learning. Same thing when I do martial arts. I have to be really good with my right leg, my dominant leg, before I can learn the kick with my left leg. There's no way I can learn both of them at the same time. So I think that's the thing that we're missing, is a lot of people haven't laid down those memories because the pandemic has been there and it's not led to good rest. And I think the notion of productivity and whether our students and young people were learning enough during the pandemic is like the wrong question to have asked. Were they just allowed to be, rather than doing and producing? And so I think the focus on what's their final mark is not the right question to have been asking. It's, are they processing information? And I think chunking information is a great way, because that is how we learn. There's so many times I'd be in a lecture that was 2-3 hours and I'd only get, 3 or 4 pieces of it. There's things where I'm like, I never learned about genetics ever. And then I look back through my notebook and I'm like, oh, there's copious notes on genetics. I don't even remember learning it. Do you know what I mean? So it's so much information at once. And you see like on Udemy or these courses that you can take, right? And they're all like 3-minute videos or 5-minute videos. Same thing with YouTube, right? Like that kind of, it does make sense. And as a teacher, I think that why don't we go towards that?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure that in the future we'll move more towards that. I'm sure that we'll realize that, listening to someone for an hour is not necessarily the best use of time, but maybe actually the best use of that person's time is to answer questions. And it's more about encouraging discourse, because actually that's how most people learn, is through questioning, So ultimately, what do you want a lecturer there for at university? What you want them there for is for someone to have read material or absorbed material and then go, now I have questions about it, and I want you to I want to discourse these questions with you. Well, that's the really important part.
What you're like outlining there, because I studied attention from a physiological perspective and how people process information and basically how they pay attention, like to begin with. And a lot of that is your interest, right? So if you are interested in it, I mean, we learn most, or we include the most people into learning and knowledge when we reach out for the people who find it most challenging to access that knowledge, right? I have a child who was just diagnosed with autism this year, and the unlearning that I've had to do to think through, because we're doing home education now, because school was always difficult for them, and they're 15, and they're traumatized by the whole school system. But one of the things that I've learned is about interest, right? If you are interested in the material and it speaks to you and your experience, you're going to want to reach out and discuss and ask questions. And as you're saying, you're going to want to do that because it's within your knowledge framework. It's within your own experience. And that's why it's so important to make learning materials speak to people's experiences, right? What they're dealing with and how it applies and is relevant to their lives. It makes it a lot easier. I mean, obviously there's things where like, okay, how does, I don't know. Well, we even in calculus, I remember learning calculus and it was about real life examples, right? Or like how to build a roller coaster. You can learn physics that way, right? That would apply to, like, I would love that because I love roller coasters. I will go places just to go to roller coasters. So once you apply it to their, what is relevant to them and what they're interested in, they're going to be much more engaged and can learn for an hour. There's things where I can go down a rabbit hole forever because it's in my interest framework. So I think you're hitting on, like, it needs to be something that they're going to want to ask a question because it's relevant to them or relevant to their interest.
Well, that leads us quite nicely on to Move, really, I think, because is that one of the things that you get personally out of Move, the fact that you can ask those questions, be asked those questions, and enjoy that toing and froing and learn together like that? Is that one of the things that attracted you to move?
Yeah, there's several things. So I really work best when I'm not sitting still and I'm doing things. I might have ADHD. I'm not really sure, but,
Multitasking, right?
I do get bored easily, and it is easier when people ask me to do things. Like, say my friends want to get together, a new person wants to get together, and they're like, "Oh, let's go for a coffee." I'm like, and then they're like, "Oh, let's go to, I don't know, yeah, let's go for a walk, or let's go to the roller skating rink that opened up here." I'm like, "Yes, okay, I'm there. Let's go do it." And immediately. Otherwise, I'm just kind of like, So as soon as I heard about net walking, Moves net walking, that was the first thing that drew me in. And it was a friend who I do martial arts with. And she said, "Oh, I've been to this thing and it's great." And I was like, "Oh, I like this. This sounds like my kind of networking." So that was number one. And number two, I really thrive off of communicating and connection with other people. And especially when they have like similar, I don't know, backgrounds, and you always find commonalities with people. Do you know what I mean? There's always that
Absolutely.
thing where it's like we care about the same thing. We care about making an impact in the world. And that was what I found with the Move community. They're all about impact and making a contribution. And together we felt like we could make more of a contribution together. And when you're walking with people, ideas are generated together, and it's bigger than what you could have thought of by yourself. Do you know what I mean? Together, it's like this bigger concept. And it's just been so much fun. I love dancing. So me and Craig will just like, go back and forth on how I can use dancing terminology to sell my coaching program, like quick step to your next career, things like this. And I'm just like, oh yeah, let's just keep talking. Let's keep talking. This sounds fun. So
Oh, that's
it's again,
fantastic.
just really fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's no bad thing that you're keeping fit at the same time, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What are you looking forward most to going into 2023?
I think more unleashing creativity. I feel like when I started my own business, I felt like I had to be again the professional, and even some of my coaches were saying, "Oh, I don't know, that font is a bit too silly," and obviously like there's meeting your client where they are, and if you're too far over here, they can't see themselves in that space, right? So I've been learning that kind of, I guess in dancing, we think about like stretch and compression. And there's kind of a flow that goes with that, and knowing when to stretch and when to compress and bring it in, I think is something that flow, I really enjoy the energies of. And then pushing those boundaries of like, can I be this creative? And also experimenting, right? Like I was such like a good experimenter when I was in academia, and I would like to bring back that sense of wonder and experimentation with business, that there's not a right way. I can read all these books on marketing and things, but there's not a right way. And I think with Move, it's been a way of kind of testing out those ideas with people and being like, have you done this? And no one says, no, don't do that. They like give more to it. They're like, okay, what if we put this color over this, this color in this way? Or what if we make it fuzzy? What if we make it, so you
It's
get
really
like,
refreshing to hear you say that, because it's one of my kind of bugbears, especially on social media. Obviously, I help people with their marketing, but it's, for me, when I see on different platforms, etc., people saying, well, this is the way you should do this, as sort of marketing experts, it gets my goat, because, for me, if everybody did the same, then we'd get tired at looking at each other, as the the song goes, and that's the problem, isn't it? You can't stand out if everybody looks the same. Yes, to some extent, what you're saying there is that we have to learn what people's expectations are and where we need to meet them. But ultimately, we want people to be slightly disruptive. We want people to prick our interest and take us to a new level. And if they're not doing that, then, you know, they're just a Me Too, same old type of business. And that's not very interesting either. So, yeah, I think you've got that absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
Luna, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for your time. This has been another Move TV. This is one of the last ones before Christmas. Do make sure you don't miss the special coming up later this week on the 22nd, when Mark and Andrea will be talking to Rebecca Brown about customer service, something we all need to know about. Until then, it's bye from me and bye from Luna. Bye for now.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.